Hello everyone and welcome, it's Alexandra, and this is our next part in the tutorial series where we work together on the Mushroom Collector mini book. Today we will hopefully finish cutting out the elements from the remaining pages. We will also create the binding for our book. We will bind the pages that we have created before to the binding, and we will also create the cover and embellish the cover both on the outside and on the inside. Then in the next and final part of the tutorials, we will work on the little booklets that we have in a few places throughout the Mushroom Collector mini book. I will now get to cutting out the elements which are left on these pages. This element that I have in my hands, I would like you please to cut it out like so, and then fold it by lining up the edges of the paper. You don't even need a scoreboard for that. Just use your bone folder. This is how it looks right now. I will set it aside and we'll get back to it when we add the acetate and actually assemble this piece. The same way I would like you to cut out the labels around the cut boxes like so. Do not separate between the labels, and also fold them in half. This is what you will have. We will get back to them at the same stage when we work on the large slide right here. I have cut out this pocket for one of our tags, and I have scored along the white lines which are next to the flaps. I will now fold the flaps in like so, and I will also fold the pocket. Now when I have it folded, I can cut out the area in the front to get something that looks like this. I will then add my ink at this point only to the edges, which will be hard to get to once we assemble the pocket. Next, let's measure the front part of our pocket, and in my case, from the fold on the left hand side to the fold on the right hand side, it is about 2 3/8 of an inch, and then the height of the pocket is, well, it is up to the fold 3 7/8, but I will take a piece of tracing paper and I will cut it a little bit shorter than 3 7/8. I think 3 3/4. I will take my glue and I will apply a bit of glue along the center. And then I will also apply the glue along the 3 sides of the pocket. And then I will also apply just a bit along the corners at the top. And now that part that doesn't have the glue will have to be carefully lined up with the top edge of our pocket, and the rest of it will have to be glued down. And this is what you should get at this point, and this is how it will look from the front. Now I will get back to the card that I cut out, and I will fold it in half. I will then glue it down together, round the corners, distress the edges, and then to assemble the pocket, I will just apply the glue onto the flaps, distress the edges of the pocket as well, maybe even on the inside. You can punch out a hole, and this card will go inside the pocket, like so. We'll set this aside, and you have the very same element on this page. That's the card, that's the pocket. The size of the pocket is identical to the one that we have just assembled, so I hope that you will be able to assemble this one the same way as we did before. Cut out the rest of the elements, labels, punch out the circle labels. These little ones will have to be punched out with a 1/2 inch circle punch, and the larger ones with the 3/4 inch. You will also have the cards that look like this. I cut them out around the outer edges, and I will not separate between them for now. I will first try to fold them together, and then I will glue them down, and then I can cut them apart. If you have a tiny hole punch, use that for punching out the hole. If not, you can just poke it out with your poking tool. These are just some fun double-sided tiny tags that we can also use in our project. You can now ink up the edges of all the elements that we have cut out, and then we will proceed with constructing this large specimen slide. Okay, so we have our back cover, front cover. We have the matting piece for the inside of the front cover with the future pocket that will be mounted on top of the cardstock piece, like so, with the flaps behind. Then we have the large slide that will go into that pocket. Let's work on the slide. You will also need a page tab with the word checked from your previously cut out elements, and you will need 2 of these little labels. I want, first of all, to cut out the images which are in the center of the slide, and they are mirrored double-sided images that we need to glue down together and then cut out. If you lift it up and look at it against the light in your craft room, you will see the area where you can apply the glue without actually reaching the edges of the slide frame itself. So I have sketched right here with a pencil the area that I would like us to apply the glue onto, and this amount of glue will be enough to let us glue down only the mushrooms together, but not the outer frame of the slide. Cut the inside out along the edges of the frame. We have our images cut out, and we can still open up the frame. The mushrooms can now be fussy cut around that beige outline. I have also inked around the edges on both sides. The cutout frame of my slide is 4 3/8 long by almost 2.5 wide. That means that my acetate piece should be a little bit more than that. So I will cut it to 4 3/4 by 2 7/8. I need to glue each one of them down onto the cardstock on the inside. Our mushroom images will be placed inside. I also want to add these tiny labels, and I want to make sure that the labels are also perfectly mirrored. So to cut them out, I will first of all do this. You see how the paper is folded and where I start to cut them out? I cut quite close to the red outline of the label, and I will cut them like this so that they are still connected together. I will take my image with the mushrooms. I will now kind of mount my label on top of the image. I still need to be able to cut this edge off once the label is on top of my mushrooms images. Add the glue to this side of the label and to that side of the label. Mount the label on top of the mushrooms again, and then cut off the excess and add the ink to the label on both sides. I can now position both of the images inside the frame, and just to make sure that they don't move too much, I will add a tiny dot of glue in the center. Now I'm adding the glue inside the frame, and also just a bit of glue on top of the acetate, and glue two of its halves together. I like to use my bone folder and burnish along the edges. That's our slide. Now we have the tab that you can glue on top. Our large slide is ready. Let's get back for a second to our matting piece of paper. I told you that the pocket will be wrapped around the cardstock piece, and that's what I'm going to do. Our slide will go in like so. Then we will get back to the curved pockets for the inside of our back cover, and here we will do the same thing. We will glue each one of the pockets down with the flaps being placed behind the cardstock. This is how it will look like. Here I have a little guest who is sitting, as usual, right on top of what I need to work with. Chloe, can you just move a little bit? Thank you. Okay, now I want to add a few details to both of these curved pockets. And for this left-hand side, I chose these two labels. And this label is of a larger size. In my case, it is almost 1 inch. You have a smaller one too in the kit. So on this pocket here, I'm going to use a larger one. And both of the labels will be glued down like so. Now for the right hand side pocket, I chose this image and this one. And also I want to glue down a butterfly. You will have 2 of these butterflies, and I will choose a smaller one for gluing down on top of the pocket like so. Our pockets with the cards will go inside the curved pockets on the back cover. Now we have everything we need to move on to creating the cover itself. I chose to create the cover with the medium weight chipboard pieces, and both of my pieces for the cover measure 6 3/4 by 4 3/4. Your measurements might be slightly different from mine. I recommend that you take one of the already assembled pages and measure those pages. So my page was 6 3/8 by 4 3/8. The covers are 6 3/4 by 4 3/4. So I added about 3/8 of an inch on each side to make sure that my cover is, of course, larger than the page itself. When the pages are going to get bound to the spine, they will move a little bit closer to this side on the left, and that will leave a bit of space on the right hand side for the page tabs that we have on the right side. The chipboard covers are going to be wrapped with cotton fabric, and then the printed paper pieces will go on top. To glue the covers down, I'm going to use glue stick, and I will apply the glue generously to the whole area of the chipboard piece that I have, like so, and then I will glue the chipboard on top of the fabric. I'm not giving you the measurements for the piece of fabric because you can see it just needs to be large enough for you to place your chipboard piece on top and then be able to wrap the edges all around. So you can decide what the size of the fabric should be. Before I wrap the edges, I want us to do one more thing. I like to take a piece of scrap paper, and this is just some random thin paper piece that I had. I cut it to the same height as the height of my cover, and that is 4 3/4, and then I folded it in half, and I will draw a line right on top of that fold and use this strip as my template for finding the center line on the cover. I have already marked those little marks on the cover that will help me draw a line and connect them, and later on place the pages with the binding exactly where I need them to be. So once again, you will use that template for placing it on top of the chipboard piece and then creating a mark right next to that center fold on the paper. I usually like to create the marks in 2 places so that it's more accurate, and then I will connect those marks with a pencil. Now we are ready to wrap our covers, and I usually cut the corners at an angle like so, making sure that I am not cutting very close to the corner of the chipboard itself, because we need some fabric there to cover the raw edges of the chipboard. At this point, we are only going to glue down the short flaps. Make sure that you pull the fabric with your fingers a little bit towards the center of the chipboard when you glue it down. And then in the corners, you see they're not glued down yet. In the corners, I like to add just drops of liquid glue and then press with my bone folder and glue them down like so. This is what we have now. I will take my Distress ink applicator and I will add the ink along the edges, at this point mainly on the front of the cover pieces, and we'll set these aside for later. Now let's work on the binding. For the binding, I will need a piece of craft cardstock. That's the color that I chose. Now the length of the cardstock piece is 8.5 inches. The height for me is 4 3/8. For you, it may be different. Once again, you are going to measure the height of your assembled page. Mine is 4 3/8, and that's the height of the cardstock piece that I'm going to use for creating the binding. So the 4 3/8 measurement can be different for you and me, but the length will be the same for everyone. Now, I have also marked a few things in the back. Don't pay attention at that for now. You are going to put your cardstock piece on top of the scoreboard and score it on the left at 1 1/4, and then you're going to flip it like so and score again on the opposite side, again at 1 1/4, and then you will flip your cardstock piece to the reverse side, and you are going to score at every 3/8 of an inch between the previously created score lines. That way you will have 16 spaces which are 3/8 of an inch wide. I numbered them so that it's easier for you to understand what we do next and where exactly we're going to apply glue to each one of the areas for creating hinges for each one of our 5 pages, and also gussets that will be between those pages. The red areas represent the gussets that our album will have, and the areas in between represent the 2 parts of the hinge that will be glued down together and form the hinges for our 5 pages. So we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hinges for the pages. When you create the hinge, you will be applying glue only to one half of the hinge because it's not necessary to cover the whole area with glue. Now we are going to start assembling this piece. And first of all, I want you to fold the wide flaps and create another template which is similar to the one that we used before when we marked the center lines on the covers. So I have another template here which is the same height as the piece of cardstock that I'm going to use for the binding. In my case it's 4 3/8 inch wide. I'm going to fold it in half, lining up the corners and edges, and create a pencil line right along the fold. And now again I will just line it up along the edge of the cardstock and mark where the center is. I find it easier to do it that way instead of really measuring, especially since we deal here with 3/8 of an inch, and the center will be at 2 3/16. So instead of measuring, you can just use a template and mark that center on both edges of the cardstock piece. Okay, now we are ready to fold the rest. So you have section number 1, 2, and 3. I will now create a fold between the section 2 and 3. And this fold will be a mountain fold that will go like so, with the top of the mountain being at the top as it's supposed to be. And now the score line which is next to the first one, and that's the score line after section 1, between the 1 and 2, I will fold to this direction, and it will be a valley fold. So we have a valley fold, and a mountain fold. Now the next fold will again be a valley fold. I have the score line that I use, but I also make sure that when I fold along that score line, I look at the edges of the cardstock to make sure that they are going straight. Let's have a look again at what we have created. So we have a valley, valley, mountain, valley. Let's flip the paper piece again and have a look at the sections. This red area is going to be a gusset, so we are going to create another valley fold here. I hope you can see where it's going to. So we are going to have the flap, gusset, page hinge, another gusset. Okay, and then 5 and 6 will form the next hinge for the page number 2. So I'm creating a mountain fold between them. And then if you look at it a little bit different, you will have to create mountain folds between the sections that will form hinges. So the next mountain fold will be between the sections 8 and 9. Then we will have a mountain fold between the sections 11 and 12. And always look at the edges of the cardstock, even though you have the score lines. Okay, so mountain fold between 11 and 12. And we will also have a mountain fold between the 14 and 15. If it's easier for you to understand it that way, I will mark the mountain folds for you. So the first one will be between the 2 and 3, the second one between 5 and 6, the third between 8 and 9, fourth between 11, 12, and the fifth one for the fifth page between the 14 and 15. Okay, the rest of the folds will be valley folds. It has been folded. I will apply the glue to the first set of the sections that will form a hinge. Now you don't see the sections 2 and 3 because they have been glued down, and they are right here, and they will form the first hinge for our first page. Next, I will apply the glue to the section number 5 and glue it with the section number 6. Now we have sections 5 and 6 glued down together, and we have our second hinge. Next, we need to glue the 8 and 9, 11 and 12 together, 14 and 15 together. At the end, these are the only sections that will stay visible: 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, and 16. And of course, the 2 flaps on the side. And here, if we look at it from the top, we have 5 hinges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, intended for our book pages. You can shape the binding at this point using your bone folder and just try to fan the hinges first to one side, then to another, and just burnish on top. This is how our binding piece will look like. For reinforcing the binding, I'm going to need another piece of cardstock, and it will be 2 1/8. And I will center it on top once I glue it down. The height of the piece is the same as the height of the binding, 4 3/8 in my case. You can also see that I scored this piece at every 1/8 of an inch. One more thing to check is that you have those center marks on the wide flaps of the binding on the side with the hinges and not in the back. Now take your sharp scissors with sharp tips and miter the corner of each one of the hinges, both at the top. Do not cut from the gusset itself. Then I will flip it to this side and once again miter the corners. This is how your hinges will look like. And you can also trim a bit from the corners of the wide flaps. This will help you attach the binding to the covers and wrap the fabric on top of the flaps easier. In my previous book, you can see that I have something like the headbands, I think it's called, in the bookbinding world. That's what I want us to create now. I will take a piece of cord. This cord is roughly about 1/8 of an inch wide. Very thin cord. I don't think will work for this purpose. And you can also not do that at all, but I really think that this way your binding will look more professional. Instead of doing it with the cord, you can use an off-cut piece from the salvaged edges from the fabric. And that's what we did when we created our natural history mini book, and just glue a piece along the top and the bottom so that the fuzzy edge will show up. But I am going to create the headbands with the pieces of cord and pieces of fabric. That's the piece of fabric that I chose. You can choose whichever fabric you want. You can even use the same ivory cotton that we used for wrapping the covers. So I'm going to cut 2 little pieces, and I will make sure that each one of the pieces is 2 3/8 inch long, because that's the width of my spine. I will fold them in half and use my bone folder to burnish, because I need that fold to be quite distinct. I will take my wet glue and apply a bit of glue right in that fold, and then glue my cord in there and close it down, and push the cord with my fingers so that it gets glued between the pieces of fabric. Once it's glued down and stays in place, I can open the flaps of the fabric and add a little bit more glue on top of the cord itself, and repeat this procedure again, just making sure that the cord is securely attached to the fabric between its layers. Now I can add the glue to the rest of the fabric, just like so. This is how it looks. I will create another headband, and here I have 2 pieces ready to go. I will get back to my binding and check that the piece that I have created is of a good size. It will have to be glued down right along the edge of the binding piece, from this fold line to this fold line of the side flaps. So first of all, we will have to trim the pieces that extend from the fabric, and I will add tiny glue dots there, and just make sure that I kind of prevent the fabric from fraying later. I will add the glue there, and I will also trim a bit of fabric from the corners. I don't cut right up to the cord. I stay about 1/8 of an inch away from the cord. Now I can apply the glue to this whole area of the fabric and glue the headband along the top edge of the binding. One of our headbands is attached. I will attach the same way the headband at the bottom of the binding piece. Make sure that the piece of fabric is attached securely along the top of your binding, so it might be worth double checking and adding more glue along the top. This is what you will have at this point. I will get back to the piece of reinforcement paper that I have prepared before. If you will look at it, you will see that the paper wants to curve a certain way. So I am going to apply the glue to this area right here and not to this one. So if it wants to curve more this way, the glue will be on this side. Make sure that you add a good amount of glue to this piece and then center it between the side flaps. We will set it aside to dry and we will get back to our covers. To connect between two of our covers, front and back, we will need an additional piece for the spine. I'm going to use a piece of craft cardstock, which is the same height as both of the covers, and it's 4 3/4 inch. The width of the cardstock piece will be 5 3/8. I have already scored it and I will explain to you what to do. On the long side, you're going to score at 1.5 inch, flip it and score again at 1.5 inch. So you will have the flaps, which are 1.5 inch wide on both sides. Then you're going to flip the cardstock again and score at every 1/8 of an inch between the two previously created score lines. We need to reinforce the cardstock, of course, and I use fabric for that purpose. I will first glue one piece of fabric on the inside. I'm going to apply the glue. I'm using glue stick, the same suspect as before, and I will take a piece of fabric which is almost the same width as the central section of the spine and almost the same height as well. I will glue it down in the center, and then I will take another fabric piece which is already wider. In my case it is 3.5 inch wide, and I will glue it on the reverse side, and this will be the side of the spine which will be visible. Then I will gently refine the folds of my side flaps. This is how our outer spine will look like at this point. I'm going to take the distress ink and apply it along the folds. Now I will take it to my sewing machine and stitch around the perimeter of the central part of this piece. Like this. Don't start your stitching at the very corner because the corners might be visible. If you look at the spine of my previous book here, you will see that I decided to add decorative stitching horizontally along the top and the bottom. I also previously used a little piece of fabric at the top to be able to add some charms to the spine of the book later, so you can also do that. If you do that, you will have to not forget and stitch this additional piece of ribbon or fabric before you stitch around your spine in general. Let's get back to the lines. This is how it all looks like right now on the back. And for stamping, I used 2 stamp sets, and here you can see the names and the numbers. All right, let's get back to our covers, and we are basically going to attach them to the spine like so, up to the fold, and you distressed right on top of that fold so that it should be quite visible. Let's make sure that we add more ink on both sides of the fold, just in case that part of the fabric will also be a bit visible. Now I also want us to trim from the flaps of the spinal piece at a slight angle, and make sure that you don't trim up to the very fold line. Since I'm not going to stitch my covers together with the piece that will be used for the spine, I'm going to use liquid glue. I will go with the tacky glue for that. You can use fabric tack if you want to, but we will apply the glue to the flap. I'm not applying it very close to the fold line, but I will apply some glue along the edge of the cover on the inside. And now I'm going to glue the cover down on the short edge like so, making sure that I line everything up here at the top and at the bottom. Use your bone folder to press on top, and then we will wrap the long flaps of the fabric on the inside so that they cover the flaps of the spinal piece. And this is how our cover will look like right now. Don't forget to add more ink now on the inside along the edges. I will get back to the pattern paper pieces that will be used on the front and the back covers of my book. I do want to have stitching around the edges, so I'm just going to stitch only through the paper and then glue the paper down to the chipboard and fabric covers. And then before you add anything in the back, you can add some breads if you want to do that. That's my result so far. I have added 2 breads this time to this front cover of the album, and my front and back pattern papers are glued down together. You can see that there is no stitching that shows on the inside, but I did stitch through the pattern paper layer only. Now I will get back to the binding piece and the pages. We will start to attach our pages to the binding, and especially with the first page, but also with the rest, I recommend that you take as many elements out as you can before you glue the pages down to the binding piece. It will be easier, the pages will be more lightweight, and that's what you want for this step. So I'm going to take everything out from this page. Mind the way of gluing the pages down, the direction in which they have to be attached to the binding on one side. Take your first page and make sure that it goes right on top of the hinge with no problem. If it doesn't, you might need to trim a little bit more from the corners of the hinge, but if it does, apply the glue. And I like to work with wet glue here. You can work with double-sided tape if you want to. I'm applying the glue on both sides of the hinge, and then I keep my finger inside the page and make sure that it's open enough on the side that needs to be glued down. And I slide the hinge inside the page. Then I hold it perpendicular to the working surface and press with my fingers on both sides of the page first. And then when the glue catches a little bit on that paper, I'm using the bone folder and burnish on top from both sides. I think I need to add a little bit of glue here to adhere the pocket better. The first page is now adhered to the binding, and that's the way to go, and adhere the rest of the 4 pages. I will meet you there. This is how your pages with the binding will look like. We will then need to adhere this whole piece to the cover. The width of our flaps is 1 1/4 inch, so we need to measure from the inside folds of the cover. I will first keep them in a folded position like so, and measure 1 1/4 inch from those lines. I'll sketch them on the flaps of the spine. I will also continue the line that goes along the center of the covers so that it is visible on the inside flaps right here. And then you also have the marks on the flaps of the binding, if you remember. So when you apply the glue to the back of each one of the flaps and glue your pages down to the cover, you will line the edge of this flap along the line that we have just sketched, which is 1 1/4 inch away from the inner edge of the spine. And you will also make sure that your little tick mark matches the line that goes along the center of the cover. Our cover is ready. The only thing which is left to do is to adhere our matting pieces to the inside of the front cover and to the inside of the back cover. You might want to add just some ink along that fold on top of the cardstock. I think it will look better that way. I'm sorry for the mess that I have on my desk right now. I don't think that my phone will have enough battery for me to finish this part of the tutorial in a tidier way. I will stop here. I hope you like what you have in your hands now. I hope you enjoyed working on this project. I do believe that especially if you are a beginner, since that tutorial is so detailed, it did teach you many new things that you probably didn't know before. If you are a more experienced crafter, I simply hope that you had fun working on this project, and you probably purchased the kit because you like mushrooms the same way as I do. And I truly hope that you will enjoy to flip through this little book and get inspired. If you have any questions, if you want to tell me anything, please leave a comment below. Consider subscribing to my channel if you are not subscribed yet. And please, please like this video. It will immensely help my channel. Talk to you soon. Bye.